This episode of According to an Idiot is brought to you by Manscaped. You know what I look forward to most during the Halloween season? Absolute carnage. Blood, guts, the occasional ghoul, running around doing whatever ghouls do. But there's one area of my life where I don't want to have to worry about brutality and gore, and that's when it comes to my darn undercarriage. So that's why I use Manscaped when I'm at my most vulnerable. Yes, sir, when I'm in the shower, I don't want to have to worry about an axe murderer pulling back the shower curtains and doing me dirty. Axe murdering me? And I certainly don't want to have to worry about a massacre of my own doing. With Manscaped's new Lawnmower 4.0, I can rest easy at night knowing I'm safe from complete and utter dickstruction. And so can you. Use the offer code IDIOT at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping on your own tools of mass weed reduction. Again, that's code IDIOT, I-D-I-O-T, at manscaped.com. Thanks, Manscaped. And now back to the show.
Warning, the following podcast is a shit show, and the individuals you are about to meet are idiots. Their opinions, anecdotes, and advice contain zero nutritional value. This is the critical human condition and all of its strangeness. This is life, according to an idiot.
I've determined immediately before we sat down to record this episode that when you have someone with ADD or ADHD, right, that attention deficiency, what you have is a human who resembles a sim character.
Yeah. It's when you have a sim with free will. They start doing the things that you don't want to do, you don't want them to do. Mm-hmm. Like, why are they going to the fridge right now? They got to go to work. Mm-hmm. When you have ADD, you're like, I have to go pet the cat. I have to go do this right now.
I have to go stand in this corner of the room for a few seconds.
Right. So I'm both the sim and the sim player because I'm the sim doing random things. And then once in a while, the sim player within me will kick in and say, no, go this way. Redirect your path. Mm-hmm. Don't do this.
Right? And it's like you screaming at yourself, read this book so that you have better logic. But then you sit down to read the book and you're immediately like, I would rather fry some eggs.
Yeah, 100%.
And then you stop. You're like, no, stop. You're not frying eggs. You're going to sit down and read this book. And you're like, yes, I'm going to sit down and read this book. You open it and you're like, nah, I need to go flush the toilet.
Right. I just had a moment like that the other night. We'll talk about this later, but I was watching the movie Men in Black, which is what this episode is ultimately going to be about. Me and my girlfriend decided to watch it just for fun. Also because it's October now, as of this recording.
Wow.
It'd be fun to watch a little scary horror. It's not scary. It's not horror.
I was going to say, Will Smith would never.
Oh, it's so scary. No, but so we watched it, and in the middle of watching it, I had so many impulses to get up and like move stuff around, and I had to remind myself that I'm watching a movie with my girlfriend right now, and like my mind would start to wander, and I look at some cups on the table, and I'd be like, I need to take those to the sink right now. And I'm like, wait, why?
Yeah.
Why would I do that? There's no need for them to be moved right now. But in my mind, I have to do this right now.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I got to go check and see how the bathroom's looking right now. Mm-hmm. I got to go put that thing away. I have to go move this. I have to go grab this. I have to tell myself not to.
My thing, too, is like I'll notice something and I'm like, oh, my God, why is this here? I need to put it in a place that I'll always remember it. But then I only ever remember it as being in the place that didn't make sense and not the place that did make sense, apparently. And I will never find it again.
There are so many things, and this might not even be ADD. I just moved, and there's so many things that I think I brought with me. Because I'm like, I know that I packed them in a very safe way, or like I did this, or I put them in a spot that I knew I'd remember. And like the more I think about it, the more I'm realizing that I have this non-memory of ever bringing it with me. And I'm like, what is reality? Where are my things?
I feel like that, but I also constantly forget that I own things because I don't see it all of the time. Mm-hmm. So then I'm constantly rediscovering that I own certain things because like it'll just pop up in my line of sight and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't seen this in like 2 years because I forgot I own this. Right. Or like it could literally just be like a few days. Yeah. Like I move it and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot I had this. I haven't seen it in a few days.
For me, it'll be like my environment can become so much like a single object. So like if I have this thing, it could be right on the shelf right in front of me. and there's an object that I'm looking for on that shelf. I've seen that shelf every day for the past year, and so now that shelf is simply the shelf.
Yeah.
Nothing on it exists. It is just the shelf, and I will never look at it because that shelf's always been there. Nothing to look at on that shelf.
All right. It doesn't exist.
So I'll be looking for something. It'll be on that fucking shelf that I'm staring at every day, yet not staring at because I also don't see it because I've seen it so many times.
Right.
I don't know. It's weird.
I'm like,
yeah.
kind of concerned a little bit, like not really, but kind of, because I'm in a long distance relationship, right? And part of my object permanence also has to deal with people. Like if someone is not in my life very consistently, I just kind of forget about them. And not in the way that I don't care about them. It's just that I don't think about you if you're not directly in my face, you know, consistently.
This hits close to home.
It's just hard because like in a long distance, it's fine because we have it worked out where we FaceTime every night. So like I always know that she's there. But she's also in the military, which means that she's going to be on deployment for like long stretches of time.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how I'm supposed to remember that I have a girlfriend because I'm not associating with her
You'll remember.
every single day for like 9 months. Like I'll remember. But also, will I remember?
Frankly, I have no idea if you'll remember. I'm just hoping you will.
I hope I remember, too.
I never even considered object permanence to be anything but for babies, like, you know, issues with object permanence, until being diagnosed with ADD and also being in, like, a committed relationship with somebody who is psychologically self-aware. And so then spreads that self-awareness onto me. And so she'll be like, you know, I think you have an issue with object permanence. And I'm like, no way, that's for babies. I'm a big, strong man. I know all things. And it's not that you forget about them when they're not in front of you, because to me, that sounds so heartless and inconsiderate. Like, oh, I forget about a person if they're not directly in front of me. I think it's just that there's so much stimuli that is constantly being forced through your eyes and your ears.
Right.
You're so busy being overwhelmed by everything else. You don't stop to naturally think of something that is not part of that stimuli in front of you.
Right. Because, like, my day-to-day functioning is dealing with the things that present themselves to me during that day. Like I wake up and then I have to deal with eating breakfast and getting ready. And then I have to deal with going to work. And then I'm doing the things at work. And then I come home and I need to make food. And then it's just like a series of, oh, the next step. I'm having to deal with all of these things that are thrown at me. And if you're not throwing yourself at me, I will not sit down long enough to think, hold on. And like sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm like, wow, I really miss my girlfriend right now. But also I feel like if it were 9 months straight of that, at some point I'm going to be like, oh my God, you're home?
Yeah.
I thought you were a figment of my imagination at this point.
Yeah. Wait, what are you doing here now?
All right, what the heck?
Yeah, no, life is definitely a point and click adventure game. Okay, what's going on now? What am I presented with? We're going here. I'm doing this. I'm doing this until I'm not. I'm doing that until I'm not.
Well, even just now, like right before we record this podcast, you know, your girlfriend got home with the groceries and we were like talking to her. And then we're like, okay, now time to wander off and pet the cat.
Yep.
And then she's like, wait, hold on. I wasn't done talking with you. Okay, we'll go.
Yeah. She's trying to like figure out like, hey, so how much longer are you guys going to be recording? That's all she wanted to know, but we kept on talking and then wandering off to do something.
You were wandering around, and then I was like wandering in a different cycle.
Yep.
So me and you were just like...
And she was just alone in the kitchen. Like, I'm sure she loves that feeling of being alone with two people.
Who clearly have no idea what they're doing. Their limbs just move them in places, and then they touch the first thing that shows up in front of them. Living is a nightmare. Anyways, welcome to our podcast.
Welcome.
Where you have two mentally deficient people, which is very aptly named for a podcast according to an idiot.
I'm Jeremy.
I'm Mo.
And do we have a show for you?
Oh my.
I want to start this off actually with something that I'm choosing to call the non sequitur of the day.
Oh, okay.
It's common knowledge that the North American elk can't speak English or any human language for that matter.
Okay.
But did you know, due to the shape of the North American elk's esophagus, even if it could speak, it could not pronounce the word lasagna?
Oh my. Okay. I hated that you made me listen to that.
Isn't that awesome? So here's some other North American elk sounds that they make. So elks have certain like calls that they make that there are words for them, whatever. Number one, a bugle. This is a mating call that can be heard from dusk till dawn during what is called rutting season. That's when they fuck. It consists of startling guttural shrieks that escalate into a high-pitched squeal before ending in a succession of grunts. That's a bugle.
Can you give me like a impersonation?
All right, so...
Give me a mimicry.
So we're going to start with the guttural shriek. And then that escalates into a high-pitched squeal, so... ending in a succession of grunts. So, okay. Number two, a chuckle. These are the aforementioned grunts that follow a bugle, also used to challenge opposing bull elks. So male elks will go. That's called a chuckle. Number three, bark. An elk barks when it's alarmed. It sounds like a dog's bark, but with a strikingly hollow tone.
Woof. That's my bark. Woof.
Yeah, woof. Woof. That sounds hollow as hell. Number four, glunking. Glunks come from deep within an elk's throat, resembling a dull metallic sound.
I do love being deep in an elk.
Deep in an elk's throat. I cannot impersonate that, but I just want to share some of those. You'll never need to know this. Really useless. And I've already forgotten all I just said. Also, I have a little story that I found out. This is at least 50% of the story is true. I like to imagine that more is, but we don't know. This is about the Pinocchio premiere. The Walt Disney animated feature came out in 1940. Been a minute, obviously, but so the Disney animated feature Pinocchio premiered February 7th, 1940. And the premiere event was held at the Center Theater in New York City. It was decided that Disney would hire real-life little people to dress in mascot costumes resembling Pinocchio to make an appearance at the Pinocchio premiere.
Sounds problematic.
Yeah, so these little people would dress up in the mascot costumes and they would hang out and wave to kids and stuff like that. Okay. So 11 performers with dwarfism were hired and dressed and brought to the event. Page turn.
It's so weird to me how like obsessed America used to be with dwarfism. You know?
I know.
They really were like the joke, like the butt of all the jokes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's so bizarre.
The story is about a little bit of revenge. At the time, the theater had a large marquee overhang above the entrance. It kind of acted as like a balcony. The actors were stationed atop this overhang platform where they would wave and greet guests that were entering the theater. This was a day-long event. And so the actors were supplied with food and drinks, regrettably alcoholic beverages like beer and whatnot. It was a particularly warm day, and the exhausted Pinocchios gradually began to remove their heavy mascot head masks, and they also began drinking to beat the heat. As the day rolled on, the overheated and increasingly intoxicated little people began removing more and more of their wardrobe. The drunkest of them partook in harassing the moviegoers on the streets below, shouting obscenities and hurling insults. By the time the police were called, the majority of the actors were entirely nude and very drunk. According to rumor, once the cops scaled the theater and reached the marquee overhang, they happened upon the underdressed Pinocchios gambling to pass the time. No. So naked, drunk people gambling. The cops then had to chase them around the rooftop as they playfully resisted arrest, and witnesses claimed that police resorted to capturing the actors in oversized pillowcases and carrying each down a ladder one by one.
Jesus Christ.
So whether it's true or an urban legend, I mean, I think that's awesome.
That's an amazing visual.
It's like, what could go wrong? This could go wrong.
Very wrong.
I would love to, time travel to that premiere.
Oh, sorry, I made you yawn.
Yeah.
Made you yawn.
Made you yawn.
Yeah, if you could time travel, that is the place to be.
I guess it was inspired because at the Snow White premiere, they had hired little people to dress up as the Seven Dwarves. So Walt Disney was like, we need more. People love it.
More dwarves.
People love it.
I mean, there has to be so much resentment from them, right? Because, everyone, I'm sure, at that point has no tact. And just laughs at them and makes fun of them. So it's fuck you guys.
I'm sure it was a complete revenge fantasy for them.
I gotta get drunk and even just to deal with y'all.
You guys were stupid enough to lock us on this rooftop with alcohol.
Right.
And think that we weren't about to get naked and curse at people.
Good on them.
Yeah, I think it's fucking awesome.
Good on them. Well, I have an iTunes review that I can read.
Oh, that's right. We don't do. Are we doing those still? I guess we are.
Yeah, we have
We
been.
definitely missed a few, I think.
No, we caught up last time.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's just been a while. So we got a new one from Borit Anar, and it is titled Massively Underrated with 5 stars.
Whoa.
They said, this show should be bigger than it is. These two are so naturally funny and talented and also self-aware. I hope they start posting more often because I love every episode. They are so entertaining. Keep it up, guys.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
Thank you
kind.
very much.
Yeah, that's an issue that we always have faced, is that we are kind of stunted by how often we upload because we're always trying to find out how to expedite this process. Mm-hmm. But it's all about finding time to meet up to record throughout our schedules, also find time to edit, find time to research is a big thing too.
Yeah.
We're going to hopefully speed that up.
Yeah, get a better process going.
Because we are both in more comfortable spaces right now.
I mean, a lot of it is just us growing as adults and navigating life. And like, we've never really been stable in the 3 years that we've recorded this. So a lot of it is just trying to navigate our very different schedules that's always evolving and changing. We're finally getting to a place where maybe we're starting to level out a bit and we can like actually navigate things.
I mean, hopefully.
And then my eye decided to fall off. So then that set
your
things
eye
back.
fell off and then I moved. And
then my eye fell off again.
Then your eye fell off again.
That's fine. But thank you. Thank you for the review.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that you love the
pussy. I love this pussy.
The naked dwarf Pinocchios.
Yeah.
It's fine. I understand. I get it. I'm in the same boat as you.
Let's stop whatever you're doing right there.
I also have a segment. I have an Only on the Interwebs that I found, and I instantly was intrigued. I was like, oh my god, I must know it all. And then I proceeded to do no research on it, so you're going to get a very surface level recounting.
Little cursory research from us.
So that's what I do on Only on the Interwebs, right? It's not a full segment. Well, it is a segment, but it's not a full research topic.
Yeah,
right?
It's half-assed. You can just say it.
Anyway, so this is a Michael Jackson conspiracy theory on him still being alive.
Okay.
Which I find fun.
Only on the interwebs.
I heard you listening to a video in the middle, like, so Mo came over before we started recording to get a little bit of extra research done. And I heard you listening to like a Larry King clip where Larry King was like, he was caught on fire. Is that a reference to Michael Jackson, like the Pepsi commercial that made him catch on fire? Okay. Just trying some I was like, what the hell is she listening
What
to?
in the world? Yep.
Okay.
So basically, there's this whole conspiracy theory that Michael Jackson didn't die. He faked his death and has been living under a disguise in secret.
Add one more to it. I don't think he was ever born.
Ooh.
Holy shit.
Oh,
Michael Jackson never happened.
Now we're getting there. Now we're digging deep. So the idea is that Michael Jackson has been portraying this person by the name of Dave, which I feel like is a very Michael Jackson thing to do. So I think it was Larry King that did an interview with this guy named Dave, and he is very disfigured. Like, he has scars all over his body, his face from a fire. And in the interview, he apparently stated that the fire happened in 1983.
Okay.
And Michael Jackson also suffered from a fire incident right around 1983 where he had burn scars on his head and face. So, similar timeline, right? His voice is also eerily similar to Michael Jackson and has very similar eyes.
Yeah.
So they also interviewed another man who is a friend of Michael Jackson, and he was stating that he always loved to do these very elaborate disguises. And he even, who hung out with him quite often, would never be able to recognize him. And he had a lot of fun, like going out in public under these different disguises. And one of their other friends saw Michael, didn't recognize him, and the original friend jokingly called him Dave in this disguise.
Yeah.
So it's weird that that was the name that he gave him in this disguise, and then there's this mystery guy who has the same cadence, same demeanor, same voice, same eyes, being interviewed with all these scars, calling himself Dave. And he also claims, this disguised man, that he was a friend of Michael Jackson's as well and hung out with him quite regularly. So,
Okay, I want everyone to look up really quick, if you're listening to this, when you have a free moment, Google Dave. But continue, Mo.
what's going on?
I'm just looking at images of Dave, and I don't. So he was burned. Was severely burned at some point, and I don't want to make a spectacle out of that. But he does look rather scary. Did you Google him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks. I didn't know what I was Googling when I typed his name in as soon as you said it, and I was very startled.
Are you looking at the side by side of Dave, and Michael Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see it, but there's also images where Michael Jackson and Dave are in the same place.
Are they?
You got me there.
Are they?
Look at that.
I'm looking at the exact same picture.
Yeah, it's like undisputable pictures of Dave with Michael Jackson in the same place. No, but yeah, I see the same eyes.
I think that Dave is Michael Jackson.
I think you're right. Despite all the evidence I just saw that disputes that, I think you're correct. I do think Michael Jackson's creepy. I do think that Dave's kind of creepy. And therefore, why not? And they both got big eyes.
Yeah.
Big brown eyes. So why not?
I mean, the timeline.
The timeline doesn't really add up.
The fires
doesn't really add
up.
Dave was a child when he was set on fire in the 80s.
So was Michael Jackson. He was 25.
That's not the same thing. I mean, Dave was literally a boy.
Yeah, he was 7 years old, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
I think it is quite clear.
What's the difference between a 25-year-old and a 7-year-old? Now we're sounding like Michael Jackson. Now we're sounding. Yeah. Age ain't nothing but a number. Anyways.
Oh, God, okay.
I see this as I'm sitting in my office chair, ripping the leather off the seat of it anxiously.
Yeah, you have a pile. You have a pile of shredded leather that you've been peeling off of this chair.
I can't stop. You can hear me right now. Hold on. Hear that? That's me peeling off the leather of this chair. I can't stop.
It's the sim. It's the sim in you.
Sim. Garubido. I am Dave.
A Rumi Batar. A Gluto. I saw this video of someone who talked in like a bro type way, and it sounded like Simlish.
What is that?
Yeah.
You can't understand it.
Hey bro, how you doing today?
You know how shock jocks in the radio talk? In Detroit, there's this guy named, I don't know what station it is, but his name's Dave Dahmer. He goes, "Hey everybody, Dave Dahmer here." And it's like, sir, it's 2021. You can't be on the radio with that voice anymore. Oh my God. New news about Gwen Stefani. It's like, get the fuck out of here, Dave Dahmer.
This is Mo, and this is Jeremy.
What's going on, guys? It's Mo and the fart box. Stinky Thursdays here. Yeah. I hate shock jocks.
You're listening to According to an Idiot. This episode, we're going to be talking about Michael Jackson, dead or alive.
The shitty sound bites. Oh no.
And then it's like always a woman orgasming, like, oh yeah.
Oh no.
What the fuck?
Anyways, that's scary though. I love a good disguise.
Yeah.
And Michael Jackson did love disguises.
He really did.
He had some great ones throughout the years. If you Google it, you can see he would go shopping with his kids, and he would wear masks.
For a really long time, he liked to pretend to be someone who wasn't a pedophile.
Yeah.
Which is probably his best disguise.
I thought it was pretty poor disguise, but some people thought it was pretty convincing.
I was a child, so I'm like, oh, he's friendly.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys mean.
Yeah. Right.
Anyways, instead of disgracing the dead, how about we talk about some aliens?
Let's talk about some aliens and some strange cover-up conspiracies with the Men in Black. That's right, kids. This episode is all about MIBs.
MIBs.
You see that in your research and how they spell Men in Black is always
MIB.
MIB, but they actually say it like MIB.
Ew.
I saw my first MIB in 1964. It's like, what? Sounds like a sauce, like a barbecue sauce.
Like a sauce.
Sounds like hot oil. Welcome back to Fart Box.
This is so bad. I'm just like thinking about Kat being able to hear us through the door and like what she wants to be imagining right now.
My girlfriend's going to leave me after this?
Well, it was interesting because you texted me and you're like, oh, I really would like to do a Men in Black episode, like finally cover the Men in Black. And I was thinking, I was like, I feel like we've covered Men in Black probably at least every other episode.
I think, no, so we We mentioned the Men in Black in our Mothman episode briefly. Well, not briefly. I think the whole second episode actually might have been the Men in Black. The more I think about it, we might have already covered this. Well, we're going to cover it again. So, you've never heard it this way before.
We're going to tell you all the same information, but in cursive.
Yeah. So again, you've heard about it before. If you listen to the show, you've heard us talk about the Men in Black before. But this is a more singular vision of it. This is more like the origins of it and government conspiracies, stuff like that. A little more fun with it. Not so much Mothman.
Yeah, a lot more of just like, oh, what the heck? And conspiracy type things. And I'm also going to be going a bit extraterrestrial with it. So
very fun.
Yeah.
Very fun. Well, hey, let's put on our black suits and our black hats and our black shoes and our black gloves. Because that's what the Men in Black wear.
Oh, God, okay.
Do you get it?
Yeah.
Welcome back to Fartbox.
Fartbox, yeah.
All right, let's just jump into this.
Sharing their curiosity to know the unknown, their tension, their readiness for inconceivable adventures.
Is it human or inhuman? Earthly or unearthly?
I'm here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
And we still get reports of these very strange visitors dressed in black clothes.
He said, we will see you again. And I have a feeling that he will.
Unbelievable, fantastic, but I tell you it could happen.
So as I said before, we talked about this in our Mothman episode originally, and that's because in 1960 whatever, when the Mothman was haunting the skies over Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Right. I know it's going to be good because you're moving your head around like a snake.
Well, don't tell them that. They can't tell that. They don't know.
I just need them to know this visual. Back in 1960.
It was because this is what I have to do to access my memory. So there was a lot of UFO flaps in the area, as well as the Mothman sightings all throughout the Ohio River Valley, which is a pretty large area.
Really what people consider to be the golden area of the United States.
Yeah, Ohio River Valley. That's right. Yeah, it's
prime real estate.
It's God's country, really.
It really is, yeah.
Anywhere related to Ohio, I think, is, not to go on a tangent, but I'm about to go on a tangent. Everyone I've ever met agrees that Ohio is like the black hole of America.
I don't know that anyone thinks of Ohio and is like, that is where I want to raise my children.
And no insult to the people of Ohio, just
but
the land of
Ohio. Insult to the people of Ohio.
Okay,
because you have a choice to be somewhere and you're choosing to be there.
Well, not everybody has a choice. I mean, there's also people who are enslaved in a basement somewhere.
That's true.
So you gotta always
Unless you are
that.
enslaved in a basement in Ohio.
Why are you there?
Why are you there?
Yeah.
I'm judging you.
I mean, to be fair, Michigan's just Ohio, but with lakes. And cars.
Listen, I know. That's why I'm trying to bail. That's why I'm trying to skedaddle. I was forcefully dragged here by my parents when I was a wee child, much like the dwarf Pinocchios.
That's right.
And now I am stripping naked and getting pissed drunk and am going to be leaving via pillowcase.
That's right.
Of my own accord.
Very good. Very good.
Bringing it back.
That's a great, really solid callback, actually.
Bring it back. Rewind it back.
Are you okay? Are you going to be all right?
What are those lyrics?
Have you been taking your pills?
What was the lyrics? Take it back, rewind it back, you know?
You're not even giving me enough to work with, so I don't know what that is.
It drives Greta crazy because I'll always sing songs, but I will never use the lyrics.
Just murmur.
I'm just
Go back, you do that almost every time I see you. You're like, what is that song? It's like, it's somewhere between Hank Williams and like a baby sloth.
I will remember a maximum of 5 words.
Never gonna let you go. Hey, no, yeah. That's all you ever do.
I don't like how accurate that is.
Anyways, so back to the Men in Black. There is so much yet so little to talk about, in my opinion, with the Men in Black. That's why we're kind of going to narrow it down to what the individual stories we'll be covering. So the Men in Black, as we have discussed before in previous episodes, are sort of there's a lot of theories behind them, but it's the typical guys in black suits, look kind of strange, act kind of strange, from out of this world. They're always following UFO investigators, stalking people who have witnessed maybe a strange sighting of alien nature or UFOs, whatever. And there's a menacing threat to them. There is, again, most important, that uncanny valley aura to them. Something just isn't right. There's these guys that show up out of nowhere. They know a lot more than they should, and they know that you know something that you shouldn't know. And that sort of is the heart, I think, of what MIBs are.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to be honest. My brain was doing the ADHD thing, and while you were talking, I was also singing that song in my head, and now I figured out what it was because I Googled it.
I knew that I was talking to just the microphone. I watched you, like, you were looking at me too much, and I'm like, no one's listening right now.
Okay, I was listening, but also I was singing in my head the yeah, 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 yeah from Usher. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God. That's yeah,
yeah. I looked it up. Yeah, and it's like, take that, rewind it back. Little John got the beat that make your booty go. Yeah. Take that, rewind it back.
Pardon me, my retainer's falling out.
Anyways,
so I appreciate
I'm pretty sure I'm an alien that the Men in Black are probably trying to...
Well, so what I love about the Men in Black, just to go over some quick theories here, there's a theory that they are aliens. There's a theory that they are some sort of bureau of aliens that are there to keep an eye on other alien sightings and UFO sightings. And also there's two of my favorite ones are the theories that it's a government organization that is trying to silence people.
Right.
Or like a psyops campaign to like freak people out and confuse them.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite one, though, is this theory that it is in the 50s through the 60s is when the UFO flaps were the biggest in America and the bulk of the Men in Black cases arise. It's this idea that the government was sending out low-profile, awkward, basement-dwelling pencil pushers to go talk to these people about their sightings. And so that's why you have these really awkward, weird men in suits that don't look right. It's too big on them, or they're too tall, they're too small. They look creepy. Socially awkward men the government has sent that have no social skills to go talk to people about security threats, which is maybe these UFOs are Russian planes or whatever. And so let's send Gary from accounting down to go talk to this guy and gather information.
Right, because, like, for one, who's going to believe that? And two, no one's going to question the guy from accounting.
That's true.
And I feel like it makes sense, too. Like, especially with the guy that I'm going to be talking about, why the government would send out people in suits to try and, like, gather information on what people are suspecting or know of alien spaceship stuff. Yeah. You know, like, I tend to lean towards that idea of Men in Black.
So most of the stuff happened in the 50s and 60s, but the public understanding of what the government does is a lot different now. Like, we know the government's a lot more shadier and more conniving than we once thought. And I think it's totally possible the government was like, let's scare these people into believing misinformation to keep the story as confusing as possible so that they can't follow the real yarn, the real thread to the story. A lot of these stories involve a great deal of hallucinations, too, accompanied with these things. And there's always theories that they were being drugged or they were being somehow, you know, affected psychologically, chemically, whatever, by government agencies.
Right. Yeah, because the government could get away with a lot more than they can now. You know, like, things are so not even regulated, but watched and monitored now than they were before. Like, I feel like you could get away with really anything if you had a badge. You know what I mean? Yeah. Who's going to stop you? No one even knows that you exist. To everyone else watching, you're just a dude in a suit.
Back then, like, you just respected men in suits.
Right.
Like, hello, sir.
They're all cis white guys. So, like, they're all interchangeable. They all look the same.
I won't necessarily get into it in this episode, in my stories at least, but John Keel, who wrote the Mothman Prophecy, pretty prolific UFO investigator and writer of the paranormal, he talked about how in his research and in his experiences, these Men in Black characters, they were like tan and had more Asian faces. Like, it was a really weird thing, especially around Point Pleasant in the 60s when you had a lot of Men in Black sightings and encounters with people who had seen the frequent UFOs that flew over in that area. When they were encountered by the Men in Black, it was these kind of awkward guys that seemed foreign, that had a tan and looked Asian or Mongolian, whatever they were described as, which I think is also super weird.
I wonder if there's, like, a part of a bias in their brain, though, of these weird, awkward people and something seeming foreign about them. And, you know, the United States was like a predominantly white society, and then attributing that weirdness and foreignness feeling to someone of color.
True.
You know, and perceiving their memory kind of going backwards as being this other type of person.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah. I also thought maybe it could be like even someone from like a specific area in the Soviet Union, spies, stuff like that, people asking questions. I think a lot of it could be counterintelligence spies and stuff like that. But really kind of creepy stuff. I just love it because of it, the element of something's not quite right. I love that. That's my favorite thing about the paranormal. Stories of high strangeness and uncanniness.
I love that kind of stuff too. Like when we talked about like thin places, I especially love like alternate timeline type stuff, like Mandela effect type stuff, things that are more psychologically strange that can't always be explained away.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff about paranormal I think is so fun.
Yeah, on the graph of what is believable and what is dismissible, there is like a secret axis of things that are so uncanny that it doesn't matter if they don't make factual sense. They themselves are so outrageous.
Right. Well, I mean, it's also kind of like bizarre to think about everything that we see and know right now is the truth, and that's only what it is. And we're not missing anything.
Yeah.
Like the way that humans have always been and the way that they've recorded things and experienced things, there has always been a, you know, underlying mysticism. And like a lot of that, is because they didn't have any knowledge to explain it. But I think it would be kind of not like silly, but, you know, not doing the world justice in a way if you didn't try and take into account all the things that we don't know yet.
Yeah.
You know, on even like a science perspective, we know that time is not like a linear thing. We know that there's so many complexities to quantum mechanics and physics and things like that. There can be so many layers to things that we just don't understand as a society yet, but we do experience it in these blips and weird coincidences and uncanny moments. And we are, in a way, like, you know, 1,000 years down the line, going to be in the exact place that our ancestors were 1,000 years before us. And we're looking at them like, haha, they're silly. You know, they were stupid for believing in this. Because they didn't have the words yet to describe it. But we're in that same exact spot. You know, at some point, someone's going to look back and be like, oh my God.
I can't believe they were so,
They were so silly.
Yeah.
They had no idea.
Right. That's a good point.
I love that, like
you'll never know. You'll never totally know. You can never stand at the top of the hill and say, I'm the king of the castle.
Exactly.
We know the most we've ever known. That even implies we still are going to someday know way more than we currently know.
Right.
History even changes as we learn more about the truth of our reality. Like, shit's crazy.
Simultaneously, this is the most we have ever known, but it's also the least that we'll ever know from here on out.
Yeah, from here on out, right. Inching back towards the Men in Black and this idea that it was psyops, a way to trick people or scare people. I'm reminded of this story that was declassified or whatever. This really happened, but in the, again, I think post-World War II, when the U.S. was flying these new aircraft, they were doing it in secrecy. What they would do is when they were flying it, they would have the pilot, this has really happened, they would have the pilot wear a gorilla mask so that any pilot who flew by would say, I saw a gorilla flying a plane. And everyone would say, a fucking gorilla was in this plane?
Right.
Just to make you feel crazy for what you're seeing, we're going to have this guy wear a gorilla mask. So you're going to doubt yourself all over the place.
Right.
And I kind of feel like the Men in Black are most likely something like that. It's just this way to gaslight people and to freak them out and to confuse them. And in some cases, there are stories that are like, damn, it's weird. That's a real head scratcher.
Yeah. And I feel like there is a part of human nature to like kind of want to fuck with people. Like as soon as you get that like minute amount of power and ability to do that with people, like you're going to kind of exercise it if there's going to be no consequences behind it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you can go back in time, you'd want to show them a smartphone and watch them freak out.
Right. Exactly.
I would love to do that. I'm not a natural trickster, but I still have, like, the collective unconscious. We have all these archetypes inside of ourselves. We are all the trickster god. We all are the virgin. We all are the whatever. So, yeah, Men in Black, in my opinion, we're all over the place right now. But going back to the collective unconscious, Men in Black are the devils. Don't let them in. Like, they are vampires.
Right.
You know, they can't come in unless you let them in. They're not going to directly hurt you. They're going to watch from afar until you let them close enough to where they're going to tell you, hey, stop talking about flying saucers.
Right.
Stop doing this, you know?
They really are the chaotic neutrals.
They are. They are. And like they will call you up at night and not talk just to fuck with you.
I hate it. I feel like I would do so well in that kind of position.
Yeah.
I would have so much fun. A chance to fuck with people? Absolutely, I'm in. How do I get started? This is completely off topic, but I feel like you'll laugh at it. I got the smallest amount of power at work, right, as a rock climbing instructor. So when I close, I give announcements, right? Like, oh, hey, the climbing session's now over, blah, 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 please leave. Thing is people really like to linger and not leave when they're supposed to leave. So what I have started doing to encourage people to leave is playing Kids Bop. But I play like Kids Bop All-Star.
Oh, man.
And like the worst ones, the absolute worst ones.
You're an all-star. It was like 7 of them doing that.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like...
That's smart. That's really smart.
This climbing session is now over.
Yeah.
If you have not finished your climb, please do so. Or you will receive the Kids Pop curse.
You're an all-star.
Cue Smash Mouth.
You're an all-star. Get your game on. Get paid. Yeah, no, I think, honestly... Okay, so Men in Black... We're about to dive into the real stories in a second, but everything that happens paranormal-wise in America in the 50s and 60s, to me... could so easily just all be government fuckery. Or even the Mothman. Like, there's a scene, I don't think I covered this in the episode, but there's a pretty interesting scene that John Keel lays out in the Mothman where they're investigating an old factory by the TNT area, which was in a place in Mount Pleasant where the Mothman was like known to lurk or be spotted. And there's this high frequency noise that I think only some of them hear or something. Anyways, it shatters the windows and it makes everyone feel very uncomfortable, like goosebumps, and they start freaking out. And then some of them hear this loud shrieking sound, headaches, stuff like that. There are frequencies that can make you nauseous.
Yeah.
You can weaponize sound. Absolutely. Right. There's like, supersonic sound, stuff like that. I feel like so much of these stories of high strangeness is people's perceptions going haywire. And everyone sees something weird, but I feel like it could just be the government, like, let's fuck with this small town. Let's test some experimental aircraft. Right. But we don't want people to know that, so we're going to freak them out while we do it.
Well, like, even running water fucks with people.
Yeah. Running water, old wires. Anything can really make you hallucinate and freak out. We must have weaponized that.
Right.
So I thought it'd be fun to explore the origins of the Men in Black by discussing what is known as the Bender Mystery.
Oh, okay.
So this is the genesis of modern Men in Black mythology, conspiracy, whatever you want to call it. This account establishes several main tropes that we see that will continue throughout all Men in Black cases. So
okay.
I'm just going to rattle them off. Strange, uncanny physicalities, black wardrobe, such as black suits, black shoes, gloves, hats, etc. Invasive behavior, intrusive questioning, their singular interest in UFO sightings and suppressing eyewitnesses and journalists. And lastly, the implication that Men in Black themselves were not of earthly origins.
What if the Men in Black was really just like a UFO conspiracy group and they were going around to people to discourage them from talking about it because they wanted to investigate it and they were super awkward and stuff because they're a UFO conspiracy group? And
I honestly would buy that too, because you know what? From my research during this, one thing I found out is that UFO researchers are the cattiest, pettiest people. They hate each other. They constantly just slander each other, and like, especially like the old guys who were around back in the day, like they talk about each other. They talk trash about each other.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, him. Yeah, no, he was a closet pedophile, and everybody knew it too. And yeah, you couldn't believe a word that he said. He totally messed up this investigation. It's like, right. Holy shit, you guys don't pull any punches at all.
Because, like, if you figured something out, like you were going to release this story or whatever, and you heard people talking about it, you're going to go over to him and be like, hey, don't fucking talk about this.
This is my story, God damn it,
I'm talking about this.
Yeah, honestly, that's not a far cry from reality. I wouldn't be surprised.
Like that one picture of the book like the author or whatever, looks like they would be a very awkward Men in Black guy. You know what I mean?
So I guess that reminds me, I guess I should name the source material. Where I got a lot of my information from was this book called The Real Men in Black by Nick Redfern. It's actually a really good book, and actually he's, on the back, he's wearing like a dark fedora and sunglasses, looks very cringy, but his writing's actually very self-aware and very funny and informative. So I would recommend to check out The Real Men in Black by Nick Redfern. Yeah, it was a very interesting read.
Maybe he knows about the Men in Black because he himself is a Men in Black.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Maybe he's trying to throw us off the scent of Men in Black.
Maybe he's Dave.
Maybe he's Dave.
Honestly,
maybe he's Michael Jackson
totally
as Dave
oh my
as...
God. And Nick Redfern.
Nick Redfern.
Oh my god, holy shit.
Wow, we've cracked it.
I think we cracked it.
We've cracked it.
So the Bender mystery.
Yeah, so what if the UFO conspiracists, who are the Men in Black, came up with this conspiracy of Men in Black to throw people off the trail of them perpetuating whatever it is that they want to perpetuate and like cover up their stories so that they can release them or whatever, you know?
You did it.
Case is closed.
Case is
folks,
closed.
And we can end this episode.
Despite this case being closed, I'm going to continue with this episode. So, being the first story of what would gradually evolve into its own subgenre of paranormal study, the Bender mystery is particularly weird and kind of, probably to the most unwavering of skeptics, outrageously laughable. Just because it doesn't really know what it is. If you were to look at it as complete fiction, you'd say that, like, okay, it's like a story with a good idea, but bad execution. And then now, that's why the Men in Black stories got better, is because people got to take the best parts of the story and build off of it, you know?
Like any type of folktale.
Exactly. No, totally. The Bender mystery first appeared in the 1956 book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, by Gray Barker. I know, really, really subtle title. You really got to read it to know what it's about. Gray Barker was an author, publisher, and key figure in the UFO boom in the late 50s and 60s. There are a few characters as notorious or polarizing in the UFO community as Barker. He was an enigmatic hoaxer whose writings helped push flying saucer stories and ufology into the national spotlight. And in the same breath, he discredited the field with outrageous books and articles that twisted the facts or straight up made them up for the sake of entertainment. In letters to his friends and colleagues, Barker revealed a quiet contempt for the obsessive community of naive UFO fanatics he associated with, and he enjoyed concocting hoaxes and making crank calls to unsuspecting saucer enthusiasts. Yet, according to acquaintances like veteran UFO investigator Jim Moseley, Gray Barker did have a genuine and natural affinity for the paranormal. From his childhood in Clarksburg, West Virginia, Barker was captivated by the macabre, losing himself in scary stories and horror movies. And maybe it was their common interest in the strange and scary that bonded Gray Barker with a nervous, spectacled man from Bridgeport, Connecticut named Alan Bender, who through some miracle trusted Barker to tell his darkest secret, a tale of high strangeness involving flying saucers, a global conspiracy, and an encounter with the Men in Black. This is the Bender Conspiracy.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God.
Fart box here.
Oh, my God.
I'm going to stop that now. So
Can you do like a one for the Bender Conspiracy? Like a sound bite for that?
The Bender Conspiracy. That was a crow.
Can we sans the fart noises?
The Bender Conspiracy.
Oh yeah.
Albert K. Bender was an author, ufologist, and lifelong enthusiast of the paranormal and supernatural. He is
the Bender Conspiracy.
The Bender Conspiracy. He is he should be the third host of this podcast.
Oh.
Cursed with a nervous nature, Bender was known to have struggled with OCD, hypochondria, and frequent paranoia. Before his life was filled with flying saucers and Men in Black, Bender served in the U.S. Army Air Corps during World War II, stationed at Fort Meade as a dental technician. So he was later transferred to Langley as a clerk for the Army Dental Center, and while in Langley, Bender became editor of their Army newspaper. So he was also a writer. And while Gray Barker would originally, the story that we'll get into in just a second, Gray Barker puts Bender's words into prose by using the Bender Conspiracy in his book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. But Bender was also a writer, and later on, many years later, he would write his own book called the Men of Three, like the saucer and the three men in black, something weird. But anyways, his interest in strange occurrences in the sky began in 1945 when a squadron of military aircraft known as Flight 19 mysteriously vanished over the Bermuda Triangle. That's a whole other story that is one of the earliest, like, ooh, that's what started the Bermuda Triangle being spooky.
One of the
earliest, ooh, ooh, it's scary up there. It's scary. This led Bender down a paranormal rabbit hole as he immersed himself in books on the unexplained, such as the works of Charles Fort, who we've talked about before. He's the guy who would catalog any historical record of weird occurrences like raining frogs, or he coined the term teleportation.
Oh.
He's that guy. So like, yeah, he's a king of weird, paranormal, etc., etc. In 1947, when pilot Kenneth Arnold first witnessed several crescent-shaped aircraft over Mount Rainier, which he unintentionally christened as flying saucers, we've talked about that a bunch, Albert Bender was fully indoctrinated by that time in the paranormal phenomenon and was fully prepared to throw himself into further research of UFO sightings. At that time, in 1947, Bender was... I forgot about this. Bender was living in an apartment with his stepfather. Totally normal living arrangement for a 26-year-old man. Bender and his stepfather occupied the top floor of a 3-story apartment building. Their apartment had an attic space where Bender spent most of his time. This was like a little offshoot room. He called it the upper room. This was a private space where he could study paranormal literature, collect and read UFO newspaper clippings, and even use a modest telescope to watch the night sky for flying saucers. He also read classic horror novels and experimented with occult entertainment such as Ouija boards and seances. His time alone in an attic obsessing over spooky stuff inspired him to turn the attic into a functional, haunted house.
Ooh.
Bender painted scary faces and monsters on the walls and glued rubber bats and spiders to the ceiling. Bender referred to his attic as Bender's Chamber of Horrors and invited coworkers to tour his room, which was littered with horrifying images and Halloween decorations. Oh, more interesting as well, at this time Bender worked a factory job at the Acme Shear Company as the chief timekeeper. Kind of playing into his OCD, Bender was really good at like keeping things organized and on time.
Yeah.
This was the nation's largest manufacturer of scissors, so it was a scissor factory.
Oh, I mean, can I join in?
Love it. Partly due to his timekeeping job and partly due to his OCD, Bender kept 20 clocks in his attic room as well that were set to chime off every 15 minutes.
Okay.
I don't know why. So, going back, Bender referred to his attic as Bender's Chamber of Horrors and invited coworkers to tour his room, which was littered with horrifying images, Halloween decorations, a constantly playing record of Halloween sound effects, and 20 clocks chiming every 15 minutes.
What if I like decorated my attic in such a way and I was like, Jeremy, I need you to see something. I need you to check this out. What would you do?
I think it would be awesome.
Yeah?
I would love that. That's so cool to me. As long as I knew that you were stable, you know?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, what if you don't know?
Yeah, if you were just somebody who worked at the scissor factory with me, I'd probably be like, I'm not going to go over your house again.
Yeah.
But since I know you, I'm going to be like, that's fucking cool, dude.
Yeah. Congrats.
Yeah.
Congrats on doing a cool thing.
So Albert K. Bender was a perfectly normal young man, obviously. Jumping ahead a little bit, December 1950, Bender gets serious about UFO investigations and he collects UFO-related articles. He collects various flying saucer sightings accounts and cross-references them with other accounts. Lo and behold, over time, it becomes like a full-time job for him, pretty much. And in 1952, Bender establishes a global network of UFO investigators called the IFSB, or the International Flying Saucer Bureau. Soon after, Bender began publishing his own magazine called Space Review. It was actually through the IFSB that Bender met Gray Barker, who would eventually tell the story that you're about to hear on Bender's accord. Quickly, the IFSB grew and grew with members and representatives in multiple countries. Bender's dream was finally sort of a reality. Until the night of July 30th, 1952. An anonymous telephone call to his apartment sends Bender down a dark path. So the phone rings. His stepfather isn't there to answer it. And upon answering, Bender was met with a uniquely eerie silence on the other end of the line that made his skin crawl. No one said anything. He just had this really intense feeling of someone's listening and they're not talking.
Ooh.
Someone's playing a trick on me.
Mm-hmm.
Not good. Suddenly, Bender suffered a horrible migraine and was forced to retreat to his bed. That brings me to the story when he first starts to see the Men in Black. So it begins one night, shortly after that weird telephone call. Bender goes to this theater one night. He loves sci-fi movies and horror movies.
Yeah.
So he goes to see a movie. The whole time he just feels uncomfortable. He goes home, and as he's walking home, he feels like intensely like he's being followed. And so he starts getting that paranoia. He starts getting anxious. He rushes home. And when he gets home, he goes up the attic steps to his door. The door's closed, and he sees a glowing light coming from under the door. And he's like, what is this? He opens the door, and he sees in the middle of his room this bright orb of glowing light. And suddenly, he watches the orb dematerialize, and he's left with this sick stench of sulfur.
Ugh. Okay.
Like fire and brimstone smell.
Interesting.
And he instinctively knows, because he's so OCD and he has such an order around his room and all his clippings and his documents, he looks around to make sure, everything's okay. And he can tell that someone's been looking through his papers. Someone's been looking through his stuff. And I believe this was also accompanied by a migraine afterwards.
Right.
And so then later, a different night, this is the one that freaks me the fuck out.
Ooh, okay.
So later, Bender returns to the theater again, a movie fan. He goes to see another sci-fi movie. This is in the same year. I don't know if this is weeks, days, or months later. Bender's in this theater. He gets that same feeling again that he's being watched. Oh, and he looks and he looks down. From what I read, it's like he looks sort of behind him down the aisle. There's a man in a black suit in the shadow of this movie theater. He's crouched at the end of the aisle behind the chair, staring at Bender, and he's got eyes like flashlights. Like a glint in his eye that is more than just reflected light. It's bright, bright eyes. And then Bender has another headache moment, looks away, and he looks back and he watches the man dematerialize.
This is like Harry Potter. Like how Harry Potter's scar always stings whenever Voldemort is nearby or there's Voldemort things going on.
Absolutely.
This is like Bender.
Yeah.
But he gets migraine.
He has a headache every time this thing happens to him.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe it.
And as he's walking home that night, he's probably fucking booking it. He keeps on seeing these guys for brief moments. These guys looking at him with these fucking eyes in the night, just walking down this dark city street, seeing these guys look around corners at him or like standing still and quietly watching him just for a moment. And like his head's killing him and he's running home. And Bender continued to have brief sightings of vanishing men in black accompanied by that sulfur stench and headaches for a while.
Is he still alive, this guy?
He lived till he was like 94. He lived a long time. Because my first thought is like, well, brain tumor. Sounds like a brain tumor.
Right.
You're seeing things, smelling things, headaches, you're hallucinating. But dude lived a very long time.
Yeah.
And then in 1953, he had an encounter with 3 men in black inside his room. So in some versions of the story I read, this particular encounter happened right after Bender had been in contact with a UFO investigator, part of the IFSB, who gave him some information that kind of made something click in his head. So allegedly Bender kind of like had some epiphany. And then shortly after, in 1953, Bender's attic room was infiltrated by 3 men in black who wore these black suits and what are called black Homburg hats, which are just felt fedoras, sort of. Bender goes to his room. He sees these 3 men standing there, and they're looking through papers and stuff like that. And they circle around him, and they put their hands on him, and they teleport him to someplace else. And so essentially just the broad strokes of what happens is they tell him that he's onto something, but also they want him to stop doing what he's doing, and that their true forms look nothing like what they appear to him as. And they actually come from a planet that is much colder, and they currently have like a secret base in Antarctica. And so they put their hands on him, and he wakes up in this base in Antarctica with these 3 men. Very kind of like off the wall.
Yeah.
The Men in Black trio conveyed top secret information about themselves and their mission on Earth. One such revelation was that the UFO flaps across the world were genuine, and the UFOs were piloted by aliens sent to extract a substance or like a compound that was not specified by Bender from seawater. That's why they were here. They were trying to get something from the seawater.
Interesting.
They revealed that they were the ones giving him the headaches because he kept on continuing with UFO information, dissemination, stuff like that. And they also threatened that if he went public with it, they would cause him more physical harm.
Right.
According to Bender, the Men in Black simply chose him to be a keeper of their forbidden knowledge, telling him, quote, "You are charged to keep our secret. We do not wish to take extreme action, and you will find that you will often consider giving away some part of this information. When you get such thoughts, you will be reminded of the consequences by headaches, which will be almost unbearable to you. At such times, beware of more serious conditions we can bring about." Apparently after this, the encounter scared Bender into discontinuing his magazine Space Review suddenly in 1953, and he left the IFSB and never talked about it ever. Even after his book he wrote in 1962, which is, I guess, had a lot more detail than the original one that Gray Barker had written. After that, people who knew him personally said that he literally would not talk about it to anyone.
Wow.
It wasn't like a cash grab where he kept on banking off of it. After he wrote that one book, he was genuinely scared.
Wow.
Whatever it was, like, this was a guy who went on to, like, have a family and ended up founding some prolific school or museum or something for Max Steinberg, which is like a famous film composer. He's a guy who didn't end up in a madhouse.
He was a very functional member of society.
He just never talked about it ever again publicly, which is really interesting. But so I guess in going back to Gray Barker, when he told the story in his book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, Gray Barker heavily implied that the Men in Black were government agents. And at that time, government agents like the FBI, they were actually visiting a lot of UFO investigators. They visited Barker, for example, to question him about what he knew about flying saucers and what he knew about the IFSB, because they believed that the Russians were infiltrating UFO groups to create a pandemonium so that people would be too distracted by lights in the sky that they could eventually make a full land invasion.
Right.
Well, that's what the FBI were worried about.
Supposedly.
They're
like, hey guys, no, I'm sorry. We're not worried about aliens. We're worried about the Russians.
I mean, that makes sense to me because everyone was very afraid of the Russians, especially America, and during the Cold War.
It's a very easy scapegoat.
But that should probably lead you into what you want to talk about.
Yeah. So I focused my research on someone by the name of Richard Doty. And he was very difficult to find information on, actually. So there was a documentary surrounding him called Mirage Men.
I heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and he was talked about quite extensively in that, but finding information outside of that documentary, very, very difficult, which I find bizarre considering there is an entire documentary about him. The UFO conspiracy circle is very large. Like, I would think a lot more people would be talking about him, and there'd be like quite a few articles talking about him. Kind of hard to find information.
And I noticed it can be hard to find information on this stuff because the UFO publications are so small.
Yeah.
Like independent zines almost. They're that small time that it can be really hard to find stuff. Even in my research, it was hard to find any like reliable sources that weren't like, out of publication.
Right. So it's kind of, I don't know. I felt like that was kind of interesting, and like the government was trying to hide all this information. It's kind of how I felt when I was researching it. Anyways, Richard Doty is a former Air Force Special Investigations officer and was interviewed in the documentary Mirage Men. He admits to entering several UFO circles and giving them faulty information, which I think is really interesting, which kind of plays into the Men in Black idea of them being part of the government and kind of like terrorizing people a little bit. Because this is a guy who like fully admits that he was like in the Air Force, it was like an investigations officer, and infiltrated these circles for the purpose of giving them false information to confuse them and throw them off the scent, so they couldn't actually find the real story, which I think is kind of crazy. So he would kind of come up to these people and say something along the lines of, I'm with the government. If you cooperate, I'm going to tell you what the government really knows about UFOs. So if you're coming up to all of these people whose life and living and, fantasize about UFOs, and you tell them, hey, I'm from the government, and I'm actually going to tell you information about UFOs, I'd be like, fuck
cream their jeans.
What do you need? I'll give you my children. Yeah, whatever you want, right? So he would feed these circles lies and half-truths knowing that their imagination would do the rest and kind of like fill in the gaps and kind of like go and spiral off. In return, they heard all of the information in the community, which would alert them, the government, when people were getting too close to the government's knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a nice, two birds, one stone. Like you're throwing them off the scent and giving them what they want, which is supposedly government information, while getting all of the information that they know.
Yeah.
Like you can't lose in that situation. Like it's kind of a genius on their part.
So they were giving them some valid information?
Like half truths.
Yeah.
And then lies also sprinkled in. So when they would investigate or whatever, they would find the half truths and then kind of go off that, right? Like, oh my God, yeah, this is like valid. Oh my God, because this was true.
Yeah.
And then believe the rest of it.
Super smart. That reminds me of Bob Lazar, the guy who said he was worked at Area 51 and saw some shit.
Yeah.
He was talking about how the instructions they gave him while he was working there were so outrageous. They'd say like, here's what we know. Here's a list of what we know. And it was information like, this came from a star on the planet this. This came from this, blah, blah, blah. And he said that likely a lot of the information they had there was bullshit and just stuff they gave to him and his department, so that if there was a leak, they would know who leaked it.
Yeah, 100%.
They give you custom information, and then they can follow the information to see how it's spreading.
100%, yeah. Which I think makes total sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And then I feel like on the other end of the token, for his stories of Bob Lazar, because he gave like very specific information that the government supposedly gave him, like the whole handprint thing that was like completely bizarre and weird. Like, there's no way to completely validate everything that he's told us, but because we have these very specific truths in his story, we're going to tend to believe all of it, even if all of it isn't true.
Yeah, and
what I mean?
What I was referring to is Bob Lazar, for years in his story that was never believed. One of the things he said that when he worked at Area 51, they had these hand scanners that like measured the length of the bones in your fingers, which was the equivalent of, that was unique to every person. And so that's how they would identify you. And everyone's like, that's just more bullshit to this bullshit story. And then it came out a few years ago that they were using these old handprint scanners that did exactly what Bob Lazar was talking about.
Right.
So like there is these little truths that come out that prove some people's stories. It makes it more murky, honestly, because you're like, okay, well, damn, maybe he was telling the truth.
Right. But it's like, how much of it is truth? Because like, did he work for the government? I'm sure, probably. Did he work for deconstructing alien spacecraft? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because really the handprint scanner only verifies that
he worked in this place.
He worked in where he was saying he worked, you know? So one specific case of like Richard Doty kind of manipulating people is the case of Paul Benowitz. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
So he's a pretty prolific figure in UFO circles. He was an electronic entrepreneur in New Mexico, and he started seeing strange lights in the sky and getting weird transmissions on his home equipment back in 1979. So he contacted the Air Force. And Paul was living right across the road from the Kirtland Air Force Base. And when he called the Air Force to report these weird transmissions, they realized that Paul was actually eavesdropping on them and not on the aliens that he thought that he was. So the Air Force Base kind of freaked the fuck out. They're like, this guy's like spying on us. He doesn't know that he's spying on us yet. Like, he thinks that it's aliens. But they're like, this guy can't, he can't like keep doing this, right? Obviously.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting.
So Doty was like assigned to this, and he handled this guy, Paul Benowitz. And Doty told him that they were interested in his findings and encouraged him to dig deeper. So within a few years, Paul was interpreting alien languages, spotting crashed alien aircraft, and causing alarm for a full-scale alien invasion, because the military basically validated this guy, like, oh my God, yeah, that's crazy. Like, you need to like really dig into this.
And then
this
they
is
start
nuts.
putting a play for him. So
right.
Instead of showing their hand and saying, no, that was us you heard, they're saying like, oh yeah, no, keep on listening. And then they totally make him a shit witness now because he believes in all this alien shit.
Exactly.
They are broadcasting to him.
So they like fully gave him software that could read the signals. And they even left fake alien props for him to find.
Holy shit.
Right? So they like encouraged him to dig deeper into this and then relay all the information that he got to them.
Yeah.
So they could know everything that he was finding, right? While also throwing him off the scent in really kind of a cruel way. Completely cruel
imagine
way.
how fucking excited he was.
Right. So like the entire time they were essentially watching him watching them.
Yeah.
But he didn't know. Like he
Yeah.
didn't know he was watching the military. He thought he was watching aliens.
Yeah.
So the alien conspiracy completely took over his life. And in 1988, so about 10 years later, his family checked him into a psychiatric facility
Wow.
over it.
Holy shit, that's so horrible.
Like that's how far they kind of like twisted and manipulated people's minds around believing alien conspiracies.
Well, they use it as a way to discredit you, because if they can
yeah.
then trick you and brainwash you in a sense to like make you an unreliable witness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anything to ruin your testimony, because they don't know what he heard. He could have heard some
Right.
top secret information that could really come back to bite them. And so, how do you do that? You hide the scent.
Right, because if they straight out were like, "You need to stop. You need to
But
stop."
if they say you're on our team, we're working with you, you're very important and special. Here's some more absolutely crazy shit that's gonna blow your mind.
Right.
And then, however many years later, he's in a psychiatric hospital.
Right.
So it's like mission accomplished.
Right. From then on out, no one's going to believe anything he says.
Yeah, it's all gaslighting.
Yeah, 100%. The military is just an abusive ex.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So some other examples of how the military would kind of fuck with people is they would do cattle mutilations in the 70s, and it was officials like investigating livestock radiation. So they would like introduce radiation to this cattle and they would autopsy them essentially to figure out the effects. But they would kind of leave the carcasses there.
Yeah.
So people would find them and, you know, assume that there were aliens and stuff, because what else is going to be mutilating all this cattle this
Right.
way and not eat it, you know,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And like, I'm sure the military was not or the government wasn't completely innocent in that thought process. You know what I
No.
mean? Another example is that test pilots would admit to adding flashing lights to their helicopters in order to trick people.
Ugh.
Which is like we were talking earlier, like if you have the opportunity to trick people, like if you have that power
Yeah.
to kind of harmlessly trick people, you're going to take it because to you, it's kind of funny.
It's
Whereas,
more thrilling, yeah.
right. But to these other people, it's like, you know, they're not in on the joke. They don't know. But if you have that opportunity, people are going to take it. They're going to want to dive into their trickster god personas. So Doty kind of casually talks about being a part of the leaking of the document called Majestic 12 Dossier, or MJ12. What MJ12 is a secret organization of scientists, military leaders, and government officials formed by President Truman. And the sole purpose was to investigate alien spaceships. So there was a part of a series of, quote, leaked government documents in 1984 in which the FBI said that they were like bogus, like they weren't real, but a lot of people believe the documents and that there is this organization where the government is kind of working to investigate aliens, which I could see either way. You know, like obviously if it's true, the government doesn't want you to know and they're going to say it's bogus because why the fuck wouldn't they?
Right.
You know, like they're not going to openly admit to that.
I mean, the government's always going to want to, and this makes sense to me, the government's always going to want to make sure that they have a clear definition of what they're dealing with before they let you know what we're dealing with. They're the government. So, like, they don't want us knowing anything until they know a little bit about it, too.
Right. And like we already know from leaked documents that they have been investigating UFOs.
But more for like a national security purpose, which makes complete sense.
It does make complete sense. But I feel like it's not too far off to think that they have like a team or like an organization of higher level people investigating this idea of alien spacecraft.
I think most of the time it's more or less, you know, we're looking for a real earthly threat, like the Russians or who knows, maybe it could be aliens. Like, I think that's probably not their main concern. There was a thing recently, though, where Congress was genuinely investigating UFOs, stuff like that, and it didn't really turn out to be anything at all.
I mean, if it was anything, would they say that?
Who fucking knows? That's the thing, too, is like,
They
Why would they
100%
tell
could
us?
just be releasing these documents like, hey, we tried and there was nothing. We tried and there wasn't anything.
Yeah.
When there was something, and they're just like wanting us to not know about it. It's like, I don't know. I love kind of going down the conspiracy hive mind. I think it's
love
fun.
It too. I think the conspiracies are dangerous. I'm at a point now where like there are aliens. I just believe there has to be. I don't know if they've been here. I don't know if they give a shit about us at all. I don't know if there's a real conspiracy. I don't know if the Men in Black are real, but man, there's got to be aliens.
Do you know what I just realized? We're two people who are like frantically taking notes at 4 a.m. about alien spaceships, and talking on a podcast all of the different conspiracies of the government lying to us for a long time in your parents' basement, and broadcasting this to people to also listen to. We are the scum of the human race.
We are not making good use of our time.
Right.
Sure.
Did you ever think when you grew up that you were going to be in your parents' basement rambling about aliens and government conspiracy theories on a podcast?
Frankly, I would have hoped. Because even as a kid, I love that shit.
It's fair.
Yeah. Right there on the bookshelf in my room. That book on the end called Unexplained. That was my first. I was like 10 when I got that book.
Wow.
It scared I had to read it only in the daylight. Aliens and ghosts and stuff like that, and like I was hooked.
I was so hooked on that kind of shit too, even as a kid.
Man,
and here we are.
I loved it. Here
we are.
Yeah.
I do have one more little blip about Richard Doty.
Yeah, please.
So he was also tied to and thought to have a hand in something called Project Sherpo. Mm-hmm. So he denies this. He says that he doesn't have any part of this, but Project Sherpo is a human exchange program between the U.S. and an alien planet called Sherpo and the Zeta Reticuli star system. So the theory is thought to originally come from Richard Doty in 1983 when he contacted an investigative journalist by the name of Linda Moulton Howe, and he was claiming to be able to give Air Force documents to her for like a documentary that she was making, only for him to pull out of it later, and never actually provided the documents. And there were also a series of emails that was sent to a UFO discussion group back in 2005 claiming that the project was real. And this was apparently tied to Richard Doty as well.
And Richard Doty was the guy that was getting bad information from the government?
Yeah, so he's the Air Force officer who was spreading misinformation.
Oh, okay.
So he's like also tied to these other... So he was tied to the leaked document about the MJ-12, the, Federation to figure out fucking alien spaceships, and also thought to be a part of the Project Sherpo.
So he's making up lies all over the place.
This is like more so tying him to all of these sketchy government programs that may or may not be real, but he is also known to be someone who spreads misinformation.
Okay, so he's just like a government misinformation spreader.
Right, so like he's kind of known to be this person who's sketchy, and then we have all these leaked documents about things, and he claims to be a part of the leaked documents for one of those things, and then denies the other one. So people are kind of like pinning all of these leaks and government knowledge, whatever, of weird, freaky stuff to him as well, because he's kind of already made himself a figurehead for it of his own volition. Right.
It implies that the government is doing stuff like that. What is the truth at that point?
Right.
It's freaky to think the government actively hires people that all they do is spread misinformation.
Right. So the theory behind this Project Sherpo is that an alien survived a crash near Roswell in the 1940s, right? We're all familiar with the Roswell crash. If you're not, listen to our episode about the Roswell conspiracy. And this alien survived the crash and was taken in by the military and was kind of like taken care of. We were kind of being like hospitable about it.
Sherpo.
And this led to an establishment of a relationship between the U.S. government and the alien home world that the alien was from, and this is where the Greys are thought to be from. Like this planet called Sherpo has the Greys. So the military, this is where it kind of gets bleh for me.
Okay.
Not that it wasn't before, but
I know, there's always a point where it's like, oh man, this isn't fun anymore.
Right, this is like too far. Yeah, you had to take it too far.
Yep.
So the military reportedly visited this planet between 1965 and 1978, but everyone that was on that trip has since died. from the radiation that they encountered from like the multiple suns that they have in that solar system.
Yeah.
So there's no one really to, corroborate that story.
How convenient.
Right. And also, there's no way that our technology would have allowed for that at that point. I mean, I guess, like, if we're talking about the aliens, they could have just taken them and brought them over there. Who fucking
It's
knows?
obviously a bunch of hooey. So, in conclusion, I just enjoyed The Men in Black because of the stories that you can read in the Mothman Prophecies. I recommend the Mothman Prophecies. It's the most fun paranormal book I've read. Most of it's probably bullshit, but John Keel is an actually good author, which is rare. I've read so many shitty books for this podcast. John Keel actually is a good writer, and Mothman Prophecies has a wide breadth of different topics like the Men in Black and Mothman and a bunch of UFO stuff. So, but he tells stories in there about like accounts of like waitresses serving men who claim to be from the military, but like they don't know how to eat a steak.
Oh,
They're super tall and awkward, and they walk like they're made of like sticks. And there's one story too of this guy named like Richard French or whatever, and he's like, I am an officer from the Air Force. May I please have something to eat? And then she brings him like Jell-O, and he's like, delicious. And he goes and he starts trying to drink the Jell-O. Tries to fucking drink the Jell-O.
I love it.
I love that kind of stuff. Those kind of weird stuff.
Can we, for Halloween, dress up as Men in Black and act like that? Please, I beg you. I beg you.
Hello.
Can we go to a bar?
I am going to need water soon.
What do you serve in this establishment?
Do you have spoons?
How do I consume?
Yes, meatloaf. I have read about meatloaf. I want meatloaf.
You go up to a bar. Excuse me. I have heard about your meatloaf. May I have meatloaf?
I was hoping for a drink of meatloaf.
Can we please do
I
that
love
for Halloween?
I would love that.
It'd be so fun. Okay.
Well, anyways, guys.
Thank you for listening to our ramblings of conspiracies, government, foolery,
Some tomfoolery.
some
Thomas J.
tomfoolery,
Foolery.
and gaslighting.
Yes, which is my favorite thing. I love to
Right.
fool and gaslight.
Which is kind of fun because this episode was actually voted on by our patrons over on Patreon. Oh my gosh. So if you would like to also partake in voting on future topics, you can join our Patreon at According to an Idiot. You can also let us know how we're doing and if you liked this whole shebang by emailing us at accordingtoanidiot@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook and Instagram at According to an Idiot and a Twitter at Idiots Accord that we sometimes use.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, really.
But any of those are a good way to stay up to date on all of our releases on our episodes.
Yep, and our Patreon is sort of we're starting to add some actual content to it, and we'll be doing more as the year goes on.
Absolutely. And if you would like to really help us out, you can leave us an iTunes review and I will read it on the next full-length episode.
Awesome. Hey, Mo, you got a good vibe for me?
My good vibe is the fact that I can see today without an eye patch.
Honestly, yeah, really. And I hope that your eye continues to heal. I hope that like you don't lose it. But if you do, I think you'll look cool with an eye patch.
I think the worst case scenario is that I need a cornea transplant.
Oh, fuck. That is a very worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, my good vibe is to all of the high-functioning autistic men who were mistaken as Men in Black in the 50s and 60s. These government workers or just guys that were wearing suits that looked weird on them and didn't know how to eat Jell-O.
Yeah.
You know, I'm out here
Honestly,
fighting for you.
Honestly, like if you watch Loved on the Spectrum and things like that, I would 100% believe that those guys are just like autistic.
Absolutely. I'm like, he is a Man in Black. Thank you to Men in Black everywhere.
Thank you to Men in Black.
Well, that just about covers it for this episode. Good to be back. Love you all. And I will see you in time.
And remember, Michael Jackson is alive.
He's Dave. Oh!